the final one. Very exciting topic around tokenization in sports. I think we're going to see some really cool things happen in the global professional sports or the sports industry per se. I looked up some numbers. I think this is a industry that is well over $500 billion, and by 2027, I think professional sports will be more than like $630 billion industry, right? And tokenization can cause huge disruption for many of us who are sports fans. I think there's some cool things that will happen around fan engagement, fan loyalty, and overall fan experience, right? And then it's also going to create new revenue opportunities both for fans and athletes. And we have a very exciting panel today to talk about what's happening in tokenization, specifically to sports and the Web3. I want to introduce Aman, who is moderating the panel, and he'll introduce the rest of the panelists. Amanjyot wears many hats. He is an investor in technology companies. He's an entrepreneur. He sits on the board and advises many of the startups. His entity, NFT Brewery, think of them as a platform that enables organizations to harness the power of digital assets and to help them create unique experiences. I've had some great interactions with him over the last few months, very passionate about what he does. And I think you're going to have a great next 30 minutes are going to be a lot of fun. So with that, I'll turn it over to Aman, and he's going to introduce the rest of the panelists, and we can take it from there. We have a
okay. All right. Thanks for the fantastic introduction, Tanvir. Appreciate it. And likewise, the last few months that we've interacted have been a firecracker of too many conversations, and I'm happy to bridge some of them here on today's panel. And from my perspective, there's a lot that goes together in sports and the Web3 ecosystem. And I'll share this anecdote before I formally introduce myself, right? So a lot of times the point where I get excited about sports and Web3 is they're both public and they're both global, right? What I mean by that is there's such a strong emotional connect between sports fans, no matter what is going on in the world. And obviously we live in an environment that's changing all the times and is very challenging for various different reasons, but sports is a uniting factor, right? And just like Web3 and sport, even in sports, nobody needs any permission to go out and play sports. And same thing with Web3, you don't need permission to go out and build applications. And you just, like David said previously, you just push the boundaries of opportunity yourself. And that's what sports and Web3 both allow people to do. And that's what is exciting. So to give you a quick background about myself, I started the NFT Brewery last year, primarily as a means for enterprises to start exploring and tapping into how they can push the boundaries, quite frankly, how they can enable new business models and how they can unlock new revenue streams. As most of the new generations, when you think about Gen Zs and Gen Alphas coming over, they become the pillars for strong economic growth the world over. And Web3 is a fantastic way to do it. We are believers in it. And we partner up with companies like Polygon Labs on one side and with Google and Coinbase as well, building on their platforms and pushing, again, the common theme that I'm hearing here throughout the conversations earlier is let's push the boundaries and let's make amazing things happen. So with that, let me just introduce very quickly the fellow panelists. And I have had, again, this is an esteemed group of people who are experts and they deeply care about pushing the boundaries again in sports and entertainment zones as well. So we have Ryan from Polygon Labs. He heads partnerships for them. Randy Eccker, he's the CEO of Eccker Sports. And you'll hear from him a lot about collegiate and the next generation sports opportunities. And we have Dan Hennigan, who's a very famed MLB coach as well. So without further ado, let me just ask each one of them to introduce themselves and what I'll also like them to talk about is, just give a little bit of an anecdotal piece that helps the audience understand and get a little bit closer to the idea of Web3 and sports. And I'll start in no particular order, just based on how I see everybody arranged on the screen. So Randy, you go first.
All right. Thanks, Aman. It's great to be here. Really appreciate it. Enjoyed the previous panelist or the previous presenter as well. It was very interesting. Randy Eccker, I actually started out as a basketball coach, college basketball coach, after a career playing basketball and baseball in college. After 9 years, I got sucked into the broadcasting side. And then through the broadcasting side of sports, I got sucked into the technology aspects of sports and had several companies. And we really focused primarily on changing the industry, the coaching industry. We transitioned everybody from film to video, then video to digital video to multimedia. And during that time, I also became very integrated into the web space and the internet space. This is the late 1990s, early 2000s. And we started a company that we provided the web services and the CMS and more video streaming for the college athletic departments than anybody in the country at that time, including ESPN, Fox, CBS, et cetera, combined. But part and parcel of that was we understood that the data was really going to be the driver of the value proposition. The challenge was nobody was coming along with us at that time. And that's one of the things, as an anecdote, that Aman asked us to talk about in these introductions was, we were so gung-ho on the data. And even later on, I had a data company for sports where we would aggregate all of the various data sources, from ticketing to registrations to alumni databases and things like that. But we had no takers because nobody in sports really understood how to value that or how to implement those. And so the Web3, the future of Web3, I think, as we all understand, is going to be such a great platform to aggregate. And we talked about the data economy in the previous presenter, and I think that's really true. It's the data cycle. And what we're going to be able to do is create more compelling experiences, which will generate more data, which will then generate more access and more compelling experiences. And that becomes very powerful in the grand scheme of things. And I think we're already starting to see on a more consumer-based level with the DraftKings and people like that doing things with NFTs and Web3 and things like that. But it will become more mainstream as we move down the road. And it's very exciting to be kind of on the leading edge of that and trying to help pave a way for that.
Yeah, and we'll come back to all of those because those are fantastic things to talk about. So Dan, you're up next.
Okay, hi guys. I own Brain and Barrel. We're a full service solution for high level baseball. I lead the analytics department. We have a strategy department that I put together our presentations. And then we have a development site. I'm actually there right now. And so if you hear the cracking of baseball bats, we actually have 4 pro guys out there as we speak. So sorry about the noise if that's coming through. We work highly with ranked prep high school players, and most of them are nationally ranked. And what's crazy is they're starting to become more well-known than some of the best college and minor league players, just because they're a little more aware of how to use different platforms. We have elite college players, and then we also represent players. We started our own agency, and so we work with professional athletes mainly by representing them, but also when agencies come to us. We have multiple agencies that I work on retainer with, and they send us a lot of big names. I was fortunate enough to work with the player who ended up winning the American League batting title this year. It looks like we're going to be the winner of the most improved player of the year. Looks like he should win. We worked with him. So we're really proud of the development side of things and how we're going about it. But then on top of that, I also work in the front office for the Minnesota Twins. I run all of our hitting analysis, and I can identify what teams need, what players need, and what agents need. And so I started listening to those needs. And I guess my anecdote would be I'm in on meetings where the Twins are complaining about being a mid-market team that maybe can't afford some of the biggest names out there, and their city can't provide for them in a certain way, where I think that may have been true, but maybe there are opportunities outside of just geography that could start to lead people or lead stadiums to make more revenue and afford some of those players. And then on the other side of things, I hear agents complain about why they're not landing certain players, or what they can or cannot offer that maybe a different agency can. And finally, I listen to the players who are constantly in my building, and I really get to know them very closely and get all their gossip and stuff like that. And you start to get a good sense of what they're looking for, beyond just making it to the highest level and getting paid, but also representing themselves, their families, and not allowing maybe an ESPN or someone on Twitter to fully create the narrative about them. And so I'm seeing each side of this, and I just felt that there was some obvious solutions in there. I don't have the wherewithal to pull them off, and that's where I started speaking with people as intelligent as this group, to see how we could put it all together. And here I am.
Fantastic. And I think what you're advocating here is the ecosystem can definitely benefit from a whole bunch of new age technological solutions that can be married to the physical game of sports, right? And with that, Ryan, you're up next. Oh, he's muted. Tanveer, can you unmute?
Hello, can you hear me? Good. Hi, everybody. Pleasure to be with you. Thanks so much for the invitation. Again, by way of introduction, my name is Ryan Kuhel. I'm the Global Partner Management Lead at Polygon Labs. Polygon Labs is the foundation whose remit is to support adoption of blockchain technology, specifically the Polygon chain. We're a scaling solution for Ethereum. So we inherit the security and the decentralization of Ethereum. We are part of the Ethereum development community. We believe that Ethereum will be the global settlement layer for the internet of value, a world computer, a world ledger for settlement, which we think is really powerful. But we want to make it faster and cheaper so it's more accessible. So specifically, what does that mean? What do I do? Partnerships at Polygon Labs. I manage relationships with some of the strategic enterprises. So in the context of sports, just to name a few, DraftKings, some of you may know DraftKings. They have fantasy sports and sports betting. So they actually have an NFT game called Rainmakers, which you can play in the United States, for the UFC, NFL, and PGA, where you can purchase and play with NFTs on Polygon in a fantasy sports game. And they've done, and this is on CryptoSlam, so it's publicly available information, that they've exposed to their API over $200 million of sales through DraftKings with NFTs. So I would argue that's early product market fit. I'm also working with Nike. No need to give Nike an introduction, but they have launched NFTs to be able to, which are Force One. And if you purchase those NFTs, you get early access to a physical sneaker called Teenage. This is not a JPEG. It's a Air Force One exclusive drop. So basically, for this really rare inventory, you use NFTs to get early access. And I'm also working with Reddit, who's partnered with the NFL for NFT digital avatars that you can represent as your identity. So in the context of these partnerships, I would say I'm really excited about the blockchain as a design space, to be able to create better fan engagement and more ownership, to be able to build communities, and to be able to do what I call like multiplayer commerce, which we can maybe get into later, which is basically with an open shared ledger, you can have applications snap onto each other to build experiences composably, which is basically play nice together. Before working at Polygon Labs, I came from Coinbase, the cryptocurrency exchange. Before that, I was at Meta or Instagram, doing advertising partnerships. And before that, at LinkedIn in the advertising business. The reason I got into Web3 is because I am passionate about the economic opportunity that can be created through new media businesses. And I believe this design space is, although very new, and there's a lot of experiments and some of them have gone terribly, I think that this design space represents like a really exciting surface area to be able to play with. for developers and enterprises. So I'm excited to be on the panel today.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you talked a little bit about how some of the designs have gone horribly wrong. But on an optimistic level, what's interesting is also that of the top 6 NFT drops ever, 3 of them happen to be in the sports space, right? You have the Sorares of the world, and you mentioned about DraftKings, and you also have the Mythos from NFL. So what the trend that they collectively point to is that the audience is definitely skewing younger and younger. And those are the generations that will be in play and competing for every brand's attention over the next 2 or 3 decades, right? So in that environment, as the digital natives become the primary audience, my question to you guys would be, what are we missing in today's ecosystem and community level that you think would be a perfect fit for a Web3 opportunity to rise out of? And I'll defer to you first, Ryan, if you want to take a shot at that.
So much to say. I'll say, before I go into what we're missing, I'll say one thing we're doing right. I feel like I don't want to be too negative. I'll start out with one thing we're doing right, and then I'll talk about what we're missing. I think we actually have, despite all the cynicism, I think we've actually nailed this use case of what I would call collectibles in sports. I'm going to give examples. This is not just theory. I'm talking about like what's actually in market. You can go to a site. It's called courtyard.io. And what they do is they have tokenized, which is a term that means they're representing something on the blockchain as a token. So they've tokenized physical sports trading cards on the blockchain to make it easier to trade. So if you like, NBA cards, I saw some boxing cards for Mike Tyson. So if you can buy, sell, trade, and play with them. And if you want, you could redeem through Brinks, which is where they're storing the physical card and actually have it at your house. But also, just like a gold ETF, it has more liquidity on chain. So I think that actually that collectible use case we got that down pretty good. There's more surface area to play there. There's more to do, but I think we actually have that down. Where I'd like to see more innovation, I'm not saying folks, and I'll give you some examples of what folks are doing, is what I would call co-op or team ownership through a DAO. So a DAO is a decentralized autonomous organization. That's a buzzword, so let me say that in English. It's a digital co-op. You're facilitating the ownership of some entity represented through tokens on a blockchain. So we have a shared wallet. Everybody gets to vote on how you spend the money in the wallet. So as opposed to a crypto wallet where one person uses their key, their private key, to be able to send money or transact or sign a transaction, a bunch of people can do it together. So I'll give you an example. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. Right now, you have an owner, let's say, of the Cleveland Browns or the Guardians or the Caps. What about if the fans could, through this co-op mechanism, own and govern the team? And I'm not just talking about making money from the Cleveland Cavaliers or the Miami Heat, where I live now in Miami. What I'm talking about is the ability to have governance over the team, to be able to vote. What's the jersey going to be? Who are the starters? Who are going to be the coach? That, to me, is such a beautiful design space for fan engagement, because it's not just about making money through ownership. It's actually about becoming part of the team. And Krause House is a DAO that's doing this with this 3-on-3 team. There's basically a 3-on-3 league. I'm forgetting the name of the league, but Krause House is doing it. Originally, they were trying to buy an NBA team, but they haven't gotten there yet. There is Lynx DAO, which purchased a golf course. So it's a digital co-op where if you own a pass, you actually own a membership and govern the golf course. I think I would love to see more entrepreneurs in the sports space lean into this use case for teams, because I think you'll get a ton of free earned media doing so. So to me, that's the space I'm not seeing enough players in, and I would love to see more folks leaning in there.
Sure. How about Randy? You've had a lot of experience with the collegiate and the younger crowd as well, right? So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, one of the things that I think is really interesting and where there's a big gap right now, and Ryan, interested to talk to you later about this, is in the NIL space. There's 2 major disruptors in college sports today. One is NIL, and the other is the gambling, and the legalization of gambling in the U.S. And Ryan mentioned the DraftKings stuff as well. But I think this is going to be an opportunity, especially for younger, the college-age student athletes, but also their fans and their friends and people who are very interested in what they're doing, that this was really, once this starts to mature a little bit and somebody takes significant advantage of the vacuum here, you're going to have the opportunity for sponsors to get much more bang for their buck than they are currently with their NIL investments. Right now, if you're one of the top 1 or 2%, the Bryce Youngs of the world, you're on the Dr. Pepper commercials, you're on the Heisman House commercials and things like that. But the vast majority are either making their money on personal appearances or they're making their money on social media. And that's kind of a lost art as well, right? A lot of the best athletes in college anyway are not very proficient at social media. So I think there's a huge gap and a huge opportunity, particularly with the NIL side of things in particular.
Okay. And that's very interesting, because that's obviously on the college. I think Dan will have a lot more to say about, is we saw the first burst of the athlete perspective when the NBA Top Shots came out, and and building on that, there were Autograph was another company that tried to harness the winds of change, but mostly what has been missing is the athlete's perspective directly. Help them monetize their professional careers. And we all know they have a very limited shelf life as well from that perspective. But if you think about it from that perspective, and you mentioned your work with agencies and sponsors, how are they looking at the opportunity with the?
I mean, I guess just really quickly, Randy, we also are dealing with the NILs. And for those listening, that there's two, one is NLI, and that's when a high school player signs their national letter of intent. And so you'll see NLI sometimes show up on social media. The other is NIL, and that's name, image, likeness. And so the NCAA was making exorbitant amounts of money and the players were not. And I think eventually lawyers got the better of it and said, this is ridiculous. And so that's what Randy's talking about there. We deal with that relatively often. And so we have a player who just committed to Arkansas. He transferred. I don't want you guys to know who he is. I'm not gonna tell you where he transferred from, but he now plays at Arkansas, and he's making a pretty solid salary this year to be an infielder. And so that's good, and that's the SEC. So it's a massive conference that can handle significant amounts of money. But there are other players that are doing some really cool stuff that maybe go to a Bucknell or something like that, where that's not possible. And so seeing some of the more clever players in this game and through our representation, even something as simple as sunglasses or a headband, with some of the terrible haircuts that my college guys have, they need a headband. But those types of stuff, that's starting to become more important, and maybe they wear it and they wear it in a game and they show that headband. Now the three of or really the four of us are talking about is just, especially Ryan, is the utility of some of this stuff. So you brought up some of the other groups that tried to do things with players, and it didn't work after that initial boom, because people at first thought, well, I'll make a bunch of money off this just by buying and then reselling. And then eventually that bubble bursts in some capacity. And then you're like, well, what am I even hanging on to? And even the younger guys in our building are sort of like, all right, cool. You bought a picture of a card, sweet. And that's as far as it goes in their head. Whereas if there is a utility, and I'll try to answer succinctly, I'll try to answer each aspect of this. For the teams, they need to make money. And so what is a utility that works well for the player, the team, and the agent? Well, if the player essentially has, and we'll just call it a card, and I'm saying that in air quotes here because it could be really whatever we want it to be. Now, with infinity art or warp fusion. You could turn a card into something that's forever changing and morphing. You could also, so let's just say we do something like that for a player. So now a young Derek Jeter, who we don't know yet is going to be a Hall of Fame shortstop. He gets his agency, creates this card and mints it for him. Similar to the way a credit card that earns points is, or unique and inclusive rewards, experiences that maybe they couldn't otherwise have. And so why does that benefit the team? Well, if we can get a player that is now more sought after, and a fan who his emotional investment has also now become a financial investment, and part of their card gaining utility and resources is the fact that they need to show up at the games, they need to show up at the charity events, and they need to show up at the Q&As or whatever. Now the stadium is getting more people in there, more ticket sales. And so it's sort of this like cycle of one helping the other. And that's, I guess, to try to answer your question, I guess, that's the way I'm seeing the issue that they are constantly having and a potential solution. But overall, I guess the general answer is, if we can really find valuable utilities that make people want, this is a perfect example. The baseball world is very aware of what the football world has done with fantasy football. And so that has taken people that don't even know football to watching football games. So now there's eyeballs on the game because of an incentive, and baseball is searching for that. And this is where I think these NFTs or some aspect of Web3 can really grab these different people and bring it into different sports.
Yeah. And I think the story is very similar, at least in the US, with Formula One as well, where they have a physical event that was completely transformed by way of digital content and digital collectibles and digital giveaways to build that huge community and fan following as well, right? And to that point, as I think what all three of you are trying to, and I'm just trying to paraphrase in real time here, is that there is a need for a digital channel that can complement the physical nature of sports. And that allows for access globally, that allows for newer ways for teams and venues and athletes to monetize what they have. And then that also creates opportunities for folks with bad haircuts to bring in their metaversal avatars, right? And irrespective of what's going on in the physical way, you now start to have this digital way of engagement. So talk to me a little bit about your thoughts on the metaverse and how that is going to be manifesting itself. Who wants to go first? Sure.
I will. And I know we're running short on time here, but one of the things that's really important.
We have some more time, Randy. So we have some more time. I don't know how Ryan and Dan. I mean, this is a fantastic conversation. I could go for another couple of hours here.
Yeah, well, I don't have a hard stop either. So, okay. But as you know, Aman, I spent quite a bit of time with Intel Sports, really trying to develop a platform that would create AR and VR capabilities. And I think what we're all talking about today, I think this impacts the individual athletes and the individual fans who want to follow sports and athletes and things along those lines. The place where we're going to lag behind for quite some time now in the team sports and the entertainment side of team sports is, in order to create these types of experiences, it's so costly. Right, it is so financial and resource costly to acquire the data and acquire the information, and then to process it to where it's going to have meaningful value. And that meaningful value is really going to be as close to real time as possible. And that's what we were investing in and working on at Intel for a number of years, and finally pulled the plug just because it was too costly, and it was taking so much time to process meaningful and relevant content that it was just dying on the vine, like a lot of the things did in the early days of Web3 and the blockchain and NFTs and things like that. So we're going to have to recycle the gathering of the data, the collection of it in real time, and the ability to process it in real time so it can be viewed and experienced as close to real time as possible. But I think once we get there, and I'm still saying that's probably 3 to 5 years away now, but once we get there, it's going to be a very powerful part of this overall conversation for sure.
And that's where I think what I've learned working with Polygon as well is there's a big emphasis on reducing those cost structures, right?
Yep.
In terms of how we share data and how we engage with people. So Ryan, you want to comment on that, and definitely feel free to add more on the metaverse side of it, where digital assets are going to be a big driver for not just engagement, but for lowering the overall cost for solutions. Oh, are you listening? Did we?
Yep, sorry. I just go on mute when I'm not talking, just so I don't have my background noise interrupt anybody. But one of the concepts of when you think about Matthew Ball's The Metaverse, his book on like what does that conceptually mean, is this idea of persistent identity. That you're going to have this identity and these interactions that are going to persist across a lot of different experiences, and that will accrue more meaning to you. I think we can get, we can talk about virtual reality and augmented reality, but I want to get like really tactical and really practical because, this is just my bias. You all know this if you check out my blog, Blockchain for Business. I'm really interested both in like the long-term vision, but also like what's the best next step to drive adoption. Maybe that's just because it's my job. One of the things I think that's really, when you think about like why use a blockchain in the first place, is shared data, like applications, use cases, and value propositions where you have shared data. And I want to introduce or reintroduce a concept of multiplayer commerce, basically getting two companies that otherwise wouldn't be able to collaborate together, or two entities that wouldn't be able to collaborate together without needing to do a formal business development deal where that accrues value to both. Let me give you an example. So let's say we represented a ticket to a baseball game as an NFT. So you purchased season tickets, or you purchased a ticket to an individual game. And that's represented on Polygon, which again settles on Ethereum, on the blockchain as an NFT. Okay, so what's the point of having, let's say it's a soul-bound token. So we're not saying, forget about the idea of selling it on the secondary market. There's an interesting conversation to be had there about a safer secondary market for tickets and all the scams that happen with tickets. But I'm not even talking about that. Let's say it's soul-bound, you buy it, it's stuck in your wallet. What we can do when that's represented on a public ledger is that any commerce store can now stack value on top of that like Lego pieces. Let me give you an example. You went to a baseball game. Let's say there's a Shopify store, a Shopify merchant that sells really cool custom baseball gear, like cool baseball hats, cool baseball jerseys, or maybe workout gear, or maybe like baseball enthusiast gear, etc. What they can do, and this is not, again, not theoretical, they can do this today, they can token enable their Shopify storefront. So if you have the NFT ticket, you get a 15% discount, or buy one, get one free, etc. And by virtue of token enabling, they're prospecting from an advertising perspective into this super valuable audience of people who have purchased, let's say, season tickets or club seats, or they've gone to 10 games, etc. That data is really, again, I come from the advertising space, is super powerful. And again, when you think about this from an advertiser's perspective, because this is all connected back to commerce, they are facing, advertisers, and if there's any advertisers on the call, are facing a lot of challenges today. I'll just address two. One of them is the deprecation of web cookies. Basically, for legal reasons and privacy reasons, the data that's stored on your browser, whether it's Safari or Chrome or whatever, that's getting deprecated. So it's harder for a website to personalize the experience for you. So that's part one. Part two is Apple, if you didn't already know, they kind of hate Facebook. Okay, so they are not going to want their the updated Apple iOS policy. Basically, they make it harder to be able to have data persist from app to app. Basically, it's making it harder to personalize advertising on Instagram and Facebook. So it's just that takeaway, without getting nerding out, advertising more expensive, that bad. So therefore, blockchain with this like shared data layer, oh, we know who bought 10 tickets. We know who bought season tickets. That represents really interesting data that then you can, instead of using your advertising budget to target a third party to get distribution, you can use the budget to give a reward. So you're actually advertising against a media product owned by the customer, the NFT. Now, that to me, multiplayer commerce is really, really cool. That to me is persistent identity in the metaverse, where your data is like persisting across all of these different experiences, and people are stacking value on top of them because they're composable. We have commerce and social Lego blocks. You could also build a social experience around it. Let's say someone bought season tickets. You're a new restaurant that opened, I don't know, did someone say Minnesota? You're a new super cool bar that opened in Minnesota. It's token enabled tickets. If you bought season tickets, you know, tonight you come for free. We're watching the game. So you can create social experiences around it. So like when people think about the blockchain, don't just do it to do it. Think about like, what are the superpowers? And then how can we build an ecosystem around it? And the reason it's so hard, in case you're wondering, like these things are getting stood up, but like, why is this difficult? You actually have to get a bunch of players to kick off the ecosystem. So what some people do, a lot of the enterprises do, is like, they just go on themselves. It's like, it's a token, it's an NFT. It's like, cool, what can I, we were discussing, what's the utility? It's like, well, you just launched this on its own. And it's okay. Like you could do that on a centralized database. There's nothing wrong with launching a collectible on its own, but you just want to have a strategy around stacking this together. And I think longer term, what the reason I think this is super neat is we have this product called Polygon ID. It's like a protocol. And that's basically, you can represent your digital identity with attestations on the blockchain. There's a privacy safe way to do it through zero knowledge proofs. So I would make attestations. Hey, I live in Miami. I earn this much per year. I drive this car. I like to use Delta Airlines. I like to box. I like surfing, etc. And based on all those attestations on the blockchain, I could sign in to a Shopify merchant, and then they could deliver offers to me customized. And in the context of sports, those attestations become, I went to this game, I bought UFC Fight Pass, I went to Formula One, et cetera, and then brands can stack those things together. So where are we at today?
It's a fantastic marketing tool in that perspective. And that reminds me of a marketing anecdote, right? Yes. Where you ask any marketeer and they'll tell you that 50% of my marketing budget doesn't work. I just don't know which 50%, right? And I think with the inherent benefit of blockchain, where you have a certain provenance and you have a certain ownership of these digital assets, you're just simplifying that whole equation for them. So I know we're above time here, but let me give you one final last word, each one of you, and also let the audience know, if they wanted to connect with you, what's the best way to do that. And so the final thing would be, where do you think we will be in a year's time? And when we do this panel next year again, what are your hopes for the industry to have crawled into a nicer space for you from what you're doing and your perspective on that? Go ahead, Dan, let's start with you.
Yeah, Ryan, by the way, you fired me up there. A lot of the stuff that I am no expert on your world, and that's a lot of the stuff that I've been talking about and listening to stadiums talk about. So what I foresee as far as the stacking and where are we a year from now, I know a team in the MLB is looking to put a specific section with tablets in front of them that will do real-time gambling. And whether you think that's good for sports or bad, that's your call. But that's happening, and they're trying to get people in there. And I foresee stuff like that growing more and more to the point where eventually maybe it's just a section, or maybe just a suite, but AR really implementing a major aspect of enjoying the game, where you have, you're watching the game and you look a little bit to the left with the goggles or maybe just a glass thing in front of you, and that's the money line in real time next to the player. And then the person next to you, maybe a baseball nerd like myself, who's looking at all of the metrics, and those metrics are showing how fast the pitch came in, the RPMs of spin rate and the gyroscopic spin angle. And then your son is next to you and he's watching it on the Nickelodeon version. And every time a ball comes out, it has little flames. And when it gets hit, fireworks come out and the green Nickelodeon slime or something comes out, whatever. Each of those, that's money because Nickelodeon had to beat Disney to get that. And Watson had to get the sponsorship for the metrics. And DraftKings had to beat FanDuel and for the right to do the money line. And so each one of those things do stack. And I foresee that happening sooner than later. Going back to Randy's point of this is really costly. I'm just trying to do a pretty basic AI to sort of clone my own training. And so anybody listening that knows good AI or machine learning, please reach out to me. But even that is exorbitantly expensive. It's deep into the 7 figures for what I'm trying to do. And the only way I think we're going to really see this get pulled off at the highest levels is if they see true revenue coming from it. So unfortunately, maybe for some of the viewers, the sponsorships are going to start to get pretty intense within that, but I think the experience will too. And I'm excited for that part of it. The final thing I'll say, I know you wanted an anecdote. What started me down this road was the TV that you guys can't see right in front of me here. It's a 90-inch screen that we use for our presentations, and it has Roku on it. And when it's not moving, the Roku screensaver starts going. And all it is like this purple skyline that just shifts slowly across the screen. And then one day I noticed one of the buildings in the skyline was an Acura dealership, meaning Acura paid for digital space. And then I noticed later on there was a billboard for a movie coming out. And so now Roku has found a way, not just their remote. Here's their remote where clearly Netflix, Disney, Apple TV, and Hulu won the battle for these 4 spaces, but also on the screen. And that's where I foresee all of these little spaces where revenue is there to be made. And teams I'm watching firsthand, teams still fight for this. So the groups of you, or maybe all of us that are intelligent enough to act sooner than later, it is a need. And so I foresee hopefully the right decisions being made and making it a really cool experience for viewers and for players and for the stadium.
Awesome. Ryan, any parting thoughts?
Yeah, I would say right now we're, from my vantage point, seeing all these, what I would call proof of concepts maturing in the industry with blockchain use cases is kind of like we've just planted a bunch of seeds. Like we're farmers and we just planted a bunch of seeds and they're starting to grow. And by next year, we should be able to reap our harvest from all these seeds that are planted. Right now, we're seeing early success, but next year, I think it will be more material. Things will get to scale out a little bit. And it's really important to have these ecosystem players, the DraftKings and the Reddits and et cetera of the world, doing Nike and, et cetera, Lufthansa doing loyalty, because then we can start stacking things together. So it's a little bit of a balancing act. I think we'll be harvesting and scaling these use cases that we planted during this this bear market. What I'd like to see, and the vision that I came into this industry for, was not just to have a successful bunch of successful startups, which is economic opportunity, which is great. I think that's like the floor, not the ceiling. I think what would really be transformative is we have a digital identity that you actually own. And you get to make attestations when you sign into Delta, any commerce store, anywhere you go, and your data works for you. So you make money from your data as opposed to a third party. To me, that's the vision. Everything else is great. Everything else is awesome. But that, I think, like next year we'll hopefully get closer to that. I don't think next year, I think the use cases will be mature. We'll be reaping the harvest. But that's still the long-term vision that at least motivates me.
Awesome. Randy.
Yeah, this has been so great. I appreciate Aman asking me to be on the panel, and I've learned a lot. I think one of the things that comes to mind in the next year, I'd love to work with all 3 of you guys to really forward the activation of these concepts into sports. We are very well connected as kind of a digital agency and a data agency into the sports market, with access to virtually anybody in sports based on the history and the legacy relationships that we have. And if I need to look at one particular area specifically that I think there's a great opportunity, I would like to see in the next year the NIL space, to Dan's point, the NIL space really start to mature in this way. We were approached by a European blockchain company who wanted us to help them into the US, and we turned them down primarily because the relationships are so important in sports, as you guys are starting to understand and get to know, that you can't afford to bring people in who are not going to honor those relationships and have the same level of principles and integrity and things like that you do. And so what I'd really like to see is, because NFTs and blockchain really has a negative connotation right now in the sports space, and in particular in the collegiate sports space and NIL, because of some of the failures that Ryan talked about and some of the people that were out front maybe a little too far and weren't able to deliver. And I think the NIL space was $1 billion industry in its first year in the college space. Now we're just finished the second year. It's almost a $2 billion industry without any real blockchain or metaverse or Web3 types of applications helping to drive that. And I think there's a tremendous opportunity, and we're really well connected in that space. I'm an advisor to the largest marketplace in the country. One of my good friends is just going to work for one of the major agencies, and we've been talking about this for the last few weeks. And then my company, Eccker Sports, we actually provide education, guidance, and support for all the stakeholders in the high school market. So we are uniquely positioned, and I would like to be able to kind of hop on the wave here and help to bring this into the NIL space at the college and the high school level, because I think it's going to add tremendous value from a data, from a monetization, and from an educational perspective. And, I'd love to be a part of that.
Absolutely. And those are markets, like I mentioned, there's such a big push towards digital nativism that all those markets that you're all talking about, whether it's from a sponsorship perspective or a digital native identity perspective or the next generation of athletes and stars, it's all going to be mediated, and the form factor is going to be such a simple device as the one that is in our hands, the phone itself. And what we've got to do is really make it easy for people to launch these experiences and to make it interoperable between a bunch of different applications that people use already, and not try to reinvent the wheel in terms of distribution cycle of these, but to have the ecosystem and the partnerships in play so that you can very quickly re-energize the community and reorient it in real time, real use cases, and morph it into something that you as a marketer would like to desire, right? And I think that's where the biggest opportunities will lie. And hopefully by the time we do this panel again in a year's time, some of these predictions will have come true, and some of the infrastructure that requires to be mature enough for these to happen will be in place. So with that, I think this was a great conversation, and let's go build amazing things. And the only way to do that is with partnerships, and to keep your eyes and ears open for how do we push the next boundaries that we may encounter in this space, but doing it together makes it so much more fun. Over to you, Tanvir.
Gentlemen, bravo. The credibility you have in your respective professions and bringing your knowledge and experiences. This was such a treat. You'll set the virtual stage on fire. I can't wait a full year to get you guys back. I want to dedicate a whole event to sports tokenization. So we'll make that happen. I'm trying to get some resources so we could have an event dedicated to this field, and hopefully all of you will be able to join us. And Aman, you architected this whole thing. You brought incredible folks to the table. Thank you so much for that. You all kept us in rapt attention, and I'd put this on my LinkedIn. Hey, it's going to be a riveting session, and it was more than that. So once again, Dan, Randy, Ryan, Aman, thank you so much for joining us. And either through Aman, I'll work through Aman and keep you all posted, and hopefully we'll have an event dedicated to sports, in the near future.
Fantastic. Looking forward to that. And thank you, Dan. Thank you, Ryan and Randy. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, very good.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Thank you now.
Thanks to the whole audience too. You guys have been great. We'll get the recording out on our YouTube channels, and I'll get it out to the speakers as well, the recording.
Okay, perfect.
We'll sign out, folks. Have a great rest of your day.
You too.